Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking, and as always, great to have you along for another episode of Classic Fights. We're going to jump straight into it tonight because we've got a rip-roaring edition for you, or episode. I'm going to bring in my co-host tonight, Grant Tassie Brown and Mike Altamura. I won't ask how you're going, Tassie, because I reckon, speaking off air, you might have had a rough day. But Mike, how are you going?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm definitely not fired up like Tassie Brown. But
great to see Tassie smiling.
I was actually, I'm not going to spoil what our choice is for this week yet, but just watching back both fights, I just think what a terrific choice. These are fights that the build-up gives you a certain expectation, and then the fight goes and supersedes it. So it was an absolute pleasure to go back and review both contests.
It was, and Tassie, it was your choice, mate. You've had a few good ones lately. I'm surprised this one hadn't come up previously, but who have you got in this episode?
Yeah, mate, we've got Nigel BENN versus Chris EUBANK 1 and 2.
1 and 2. So, World Super Middleweight Championship, England. Well, we'll just put England because they're in two different places, of course, but in 1990 and 1993. So, mate, just set the scene for us in this one. I'm sure all the boxing fans out there have obviously seen the fights and know the background, but just set the scene of what made this fight happen.
Yeah, obviously, just we know about how England or Great Britain always get behind their fighters, and they're the best fans in the world. I mean, be it darts or two flies up a wall, they'll pack a crowd out. So these two were quite, both big names. A good rivalry started between them, and they finally got it done. And I mean, it's a legendary. I wanted to sort of feature an English affair like this because we always talk about America fighters, but these two, both guys, carve their names in the Hall of Fame books, not just because they fought each other individually. They're both going to be Hall of Famers.
Yeah, and Mike, Tassie's right. I don't think we've done a non-Australian/American classic fight yet, but geez, this would have to be, off the top of my head, rate as probably the greatest or most bitter rivalry in English boxing history, if not one of the main ones in boxing history.
Well, it's definitely top three, probably number one, like you said, in English history. I think that, and how you know that is that both guys are synonymous with one another. When you mention EUBANK, immediately Nigel BENN's name is tagged with it, and vice versa. I think that there's a lot of fighters, Michael Watson, of course, Thulani Malinga. There's a lot of fighters, Steve Collins, that fought both of them. So there's a lot of narratives that intertwine. But all those narratives really start with these two facing off with each other in 1990. And it was a WBO middleweight world title. And the interesting context of the fight is that both guys are from what you'd consider lower class backgrounds. But high society was attracted to EUBANK, whereas BENN was more the true fight fan's fighter. He was considered the genuine fighter. EUBANK was considered a little bit aloof, maybe not necessarily not an overhyped product, but an untested athlete going into the bout. And so the interesting context of this fight is that even though they both come from very similar backgrounds and struggled throughout their upbringings, found boxing as an outlet, BENN was the one that was considered to be, say, closer to the street, and EUBANK, I guess, because of his general demeanor and temperament, was considered to be too aloof to be a genuine fighter. So a lot of people felt like this fight, their first outing, was going to put his character to the test.
Yeah, Tassie, and Chris EUBANK, like Mike said, he was aloof because even to this day, he's just really odd. And if you look at he's that working class type of fighter. He certainly doesn't present himself as one, or didn't back then. And even after he had 10 fights, he was calling out world champion Nigel BENN. So he obviously had a bit of fun about him even back then.
Yeah, he's an odd character. Probably the best way to. But I mean, the guy can fight though. I mean, the way he speaks and that, you can't judge him because he could fight, And BENN was your more gritty sort of rugged sort of guy from the streets, but yeah, EUBANK definitely was as tough as any of them. So the way he carries himself outside the ring is definitely not the way he is in the ring because he's an absolute beast.
Yeah, he was. Well, before I let you comment there, Michael, just a little bit of a lead up to it. This is when the fight was initially announced, and they were on a talk show in England, and this is what they had to say.
Of November, you are mine, you belong to me. I am the man.
Nigel, Benny's talking to you.
To face me. The thing about him, he's all hype. He's all hype, you know, and I can't wait to November the 18th to give him a good hiding. You know, he went out there, he'd done a job on a guy. Who was it? Another Sanchez, Gomez, Lopez. Who was it? Another road sweeper? Hey, I've done that before. Now I'm with the big boys. I'm there already. He's got to prove himself, not me.
I have what it takes. This man is nothing but, he's the real hype. I come up the hard way. I
I'll prove myself, boy.
You had your time. Let's have some parliamentary procedure here, right?
Oh, God.
I have nothing to say to Nigel. I find the man intolerable in that he's so wild. I have no time for such people. He has no class as far as I see.
The public is demanding this. You know, I walk down the street, people say, hey, give this boy a hiding. Well, yeah, and I am determined to go out there firing on all cylinders.
Like, even there, just to hear Chris Eubank speak, is it put on, or that's just the way he is? Because it's so bizarre.
That's how he speaks. It seems like an act, but he's always very cerebral in his thinking, and almost like there's that calm, analytical type temperament of, you know, like no matter what's said to trigger him, his response is very measured. It's almost a disengaging fashion. And I guess that's why, you know, like I said, going into the fight, a lot of people don't recall this, but Eubank's first 5 professional contests were in the United States, and he failed to record a stoppage and didn't look overly impressive, but he cut his teeth in the gyms on the East Coast, which, you know yourself, like the East Coast of the United States is known for the hardest, toughest sparring. And to be honest, those early fights, he beat a journeyman called Eric Holland, who is like one of those guys that's got a 50-50 record but was exceptionally tough. That was probably in his top 3 wins going into this bout when you really look at the context of his record. So a lot of people thought that the persona was fake, the athlete was fake, and they thought that maybe under pressure he would fold, that there wasn't those other layers to his character. But it is, for what people look at the atypical boxer, I think it's off-putting because you're not expecting those kind of responses, you know. But I've always found Eubank endearing because there's a certain honesty that comes with his approach. He's one of those few fighters that talks about fear, talks about the concern of being knocked out, talks about his worries of taking too much damage and punishment as an athlete, which I've always found refreshing.
Yeah, he's definitely a different figure, and even to this day, he's the same. But even you see there, Tassie, he had his back to Ben. He refused to show him his face. What did he call for some political correctness or something? I can't remember.
Parliamentary,
yeah. So, and just the way he speaks, and yeah, it sounded and looks anything but like a boxer. But so Tassie, so coming into the fight, Ben was 27-1 with 25 KOs. Eubank was 24-0 with 14 KOs. Eubank hadn't really, you probably know more about this, Mike, hadn't really fought any big names except some journeymen, whereas Ben was coming off the win. Well, he'd won the world title off Doug DeWitt and followed up with that first round knockout of Iran Barkley. So I'm gathering the money was on Ben back on the day.
Yeah, I mean, and he'd obviously fought Michael Watson too, hadn't he? Yeah.
No, not at that.
afterwards.
Ben had, Eubank had it
Ben
at that
had.
stage.
Yeah. And he's a name that's in the mix as well. Great fighter of that era. Great English fighter. So it was a really good era with these guys. And, I think Ben might have been the favourite to a lot of people. But, I mean, as like Mike said, Eubank had record might not have been as flush, mate, but, still a very, very good fighter. So I remember it quite well. I mean, I was paying a lot of attention to England back then. I used to get the Boxer Monthly, and that used to really talk about a lot of Britain fighters. The WBO was more seen to be the English European belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, Mike, let's have a look at the first fight for starters. It took place on November 18, 1990. It's for the WBO super middleweight title, so Benn's title, as you said before. It was in Birmingham, England, this one. So
this was WBO middleweight title.
Super middleweight or middleweight, was it?
Middleweight.
Okay, no drama, sorry. The WBO middleweight title held by Nigel Benn. Let's have a look at some of the highlights here. And I think Richard Steele said after this fight, Mike, that it's the most electrifying fight that he'd ever been a part of. And that's a bold statement coming from someone like Richard Steele.
I think it's just one of those fights. Like I said, there was so much genuine build-up and expectation. And then you see here from the opening bell, both guys are thrown with bad intentions, but also picking their shots. They're not just in there standing and swinging. You see it's a setup. There's a wait, and then boom. And I think that, a lot of people expected EUBANK to pot shot and run. And you can see here, even though he's moving and trying to utilize the ring, he's holding his ground.
Tassie, I thought it was interesting too, reading a little bit of the facts about it, that Benn tried everything, or Benn's team tried everything they could to upset EUBANK, even cutting off his music halfway through his ring walk and these sorts of things. But it didn't seem to affect him, because you can see there, he looks very, very confident in that first round, which is surprising considering Benn's reputation as the Dark Destroyer, as they called him.
Yeah, very composed. EUBANK, I mean, he obviously wasn't going to let anyone spoil this for him. So, he's just that sort of guy, a real aura of confidence, a bit like a Prince Nazim Hamed, just a real aura of confidence. And he truly believed in himself, and he wasn't going to let anything distract him on this night, that's for sure.
What are your thoughts when you? I can't remember what round this was, Mike, but you can see there, both of them landing some big bombs, taking him well as well. But you can see the game plan there of Nigel Benn, just the same old. But looking at the fight again when I watched it, so impressed with what EUBANK brought to the table, his poise, composure, and putting those power shots together.
I think the other thing to look at with this bout too is that whoever essentially wound up on the ropes was in a position of danger. So a lot of the fight was contested with the guys circling each other and trying to control center ring. Even if you see EUBANK will move, but then as soon as he lands a sharp shot, he's on him to try and force him back to the ropes and trap him. It was a really interesting tactical fight. And the interesting part you're seeing here, and this perfect clips because it reflects not a lot of left hands. Both guys are winging them overhand right. So is it any surprise that Nigel Benn's left eye was shut closed and Chris EUBANK's eye was about 2/3 of the way closed by the conclusion?
Yeah, just look at those punches, Tassie. It was just, it would have been awesome to be there in attendance.
It would have been, like Richard Steele said, would have been one of the most electrifying fights, and the crowd and the rivalry, and just being in England, we know what the crowds are like. And it's non-stop. It is non-stop from round one, these two guys. There was a definite pure rivalry, pure hatred there, and both were so much to lose and so much to gain was bragging rights in the UK.
I think too, Mike, just talking about, we spoke about Richard Steele earlier, I think this fight was just after the Meldrick Taylor Chavez fight, I think. So to say that it was the most electrifying atmosphere he's been part of, as I said before, it's a bold statement.
Yeah, and he actually reffed a lot of Tyson's fights, Holyfield's bouts as well. So, it's a massive statement. But like Taz said, I think that there's nothing like a genuine rivalry in the UK. And even though these two didn't really despise each other outside of the ropes, but there was just such a fierce competitiveness between them. And I do think that Benn took it personally when EUBANK turned his back. Of course, there's what EUBANK will claim was a controversial knockdown, but it was a grazing shot to the temple and he went down. So technically it's a knockdown, but you see how exceptionally well conditioned he is. He recovered quite well from it.
So that's the end of the 8th round, Tassie. So this is round 9, and this is obviously where it ended.
Yeah,
there.
EUBANK. EUBANK catches him and still comes in and stops it.
What do you guys think of this build up to the stoppage here? I mean, like they say, referees shouldn't be aware that there's only 5 to 10 seconds left in the round, but How do you guys feel about this stoppage about to come?
I think, well, it's a case of Richard Steele strikes again. Could be the first time, but I actually think, like the Taylor Chavez fight, I think it was a good stoppage. I suppose in the context leading up to it, maybe you might have let him go, but he wasn't returning punches. He was hurt. I don't think Richard Steele had any choice but to stop the fight. What do you think, Tazzy?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they're there in the split second they've got. They see a reaction from the fighter. They see the eyes roll back, or they see like they're not defending themselves. They got to act on it. I mean, their duty of care. I mean, yeah, we know they should know the time maybe, or does that matter though? One more punch before that split second. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Mike, was there controversy after the fight? I didn't actually read about any. Did Benn's camp protest at all, or say it was too early, or?
Yeah, Benn's camp did. Nigel accepted the defeat himself, but his camp were playing on the fact that they felt it was a premature stoppage. I will say that, I think that both guys, elite conditioning by this stage of their career. I know Ben, early career, the early defeat to Watson in the 6th round was considered because he was loading up and winging heavy shots, throwing heavy-handed off everything. But his conditioning and his ability to control his pacing of fights improved immensely after that. But I think that what played a big calculation in Steele's decision was the shut eye. So the shut left eye is probably one of the rationales. And like you said, it was probably 30, 40 seconds there towards the end of the round where he wasn't throwing back. So there was controversy, but it was generally accepted that EUBANK was the better man.
Yeah, and I suppose too, I mean, you don't know unless you're in the ring the ferocity of the punches and the effect they're having and how the fighters' body language and whether they're actually able to defend themselves. So, yeah, I think you've got to give Richard Steele the benefit of the doubt. So that was the first fight. Just a little bit of info about that. At the time of the stoppage, it was actually, I think Ben was up. So one judge had it 76-75 for EUBANK. The other two judges had it 76-75 for Ben. Now, with a knockdown earlier, look, who knows? I mean, we can go on all day about what might have happened. End of the day, you can't really say that in boxing. You got stopped in the 9th round with 3 rounds to go, so it throws it all out the window. But the second fight, October 9th, 1993, it was in Manchester, England. So after this, Tassie, so Ben was the WBC. This is now super middleweight. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, super middleweight. Unification as well.
So Ben was the WBC champion. EUBANK was the WBO champion. 42,000 people there, if you don't mind, Tassie. Would have been magic. I know the fight probably didn't quite measure up to the first one, but still 42,000, rabid British boxing fans. It would have been unbelievable.
Mate, it would have been next level, that's for sure. As we said, the English fans, they're the best in the world. They travel, they go to America, 20,000, to watch a Ricky Hatton or a Fury. I mean, they're just amazing. And it's a shame. I know Australia hasn't got the population they've got, but it'd be a shame if we weren't a bit more like England. And we're from there originally, most of us, but it's a shame that we can't. Boxing's not one of our top sports. I mean, then there'd be no disagreement about how many Gambosa's going to get in Melbourne.
Yeah,
if it was in England.
Right. It'd be guaranteed 60 or 70,000. So, Mike, I know you're going to know all this because you could spill this out without even looking at it. But in between the two fights, Ben was 10-0 with 7 knockouts. He'd won the WBC title with the stoppage of the cut eye of Amoro Galvano. Backed it up with a 12-round decision. Had made 3 defences. EUBANK, on the other hand, was 10-0 with 3 knockouts, and obviously it had the 2 fights with Michael Watson in between as well.
Yeah, and post the tragic second bout with Michael Watson,
I didn't mention that. Yeah,
I don't think EUBANK was ever the same fighter. I think that you look at his career thereafter, and he just didn't seem to possess the same aggression. You see a lot of close decision victories where he was almost listless. So he would be fighting guys that were considered a level beneath him. Like, look at Ray Close, for example. The bout before this contest, he drew with Ray Close. Now, you go back and watch that fight, and even granted the knockdown in round 1 to EUBANK, he probably won the fight 7-5 still plus a knockdown. The fact that he was going 7-5 thereabouts with fighters of Ray Close's caliber kind of reflects that he had plateaued, whereas Nigel Benn, with the exception of the Malinga fight, who's a terrific fighter and was a controversial decision, Nigel Benn in that stretch really reeled off some incredible victories. Was, back to the Dark Destroyer's best, and he adjusted his style a bit, going to super middleweight. Knew that he wasn't going to get guys out with one punch, and that's what I was saying. His early career, he was a gunslinging type fighter. By the time he got to this later stage of his career, he became more of a measured pressure fighter and was scoring a lot of later round stoppages. So everything was kind of, momentum-wise, everything was trending in Nigel Benn's favour to attain his revenge. And just a note on this bout. So purses. Yeah. Nigel Benn, £1 million guaranteed. Chris Eubank, I believe, was £850,000 guaranteed.
Is that it? Okay. Yeah, I suppose back then that's a fair bit of money. I was just going to say these days.
That's a lot of money now, let alone 1993.
Yeah. So what's the Australian equivalent today? Is it double or 2/3 or something?
That's it. The 1 million about 1.8, the 850 about 1.55 thereabouts.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Not too bad. What were your thoughts on this, Tazzy, at the start? Were you confident that Nigel Benn might be able to reverse the result, or you thought that Chris Eubank could back it up?
Yeah, given past form, like Mike said, fights leading up to it, I gave Ben a really good chance. Really good chance.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, 42,000 now would have just been unbelievable. Was that a knockdown there, Mike?
No. He shouldered him out of the ring. Yeah. So you'll see a lot of these guys, happens a lot. There's a lot of spills near the ropes when they're pressuring each other. I think because of the ferocity that they were coming in. Yeah. Look at that. Look at the lunging from Ben there. I mean, you lunge a little bit, you're gonna clash. You're gonna trip over each other. It just shows the physicality of both of them, but two, the intent. There again, another slip. It's just what I find incredible here is just, I mean, this is the later rounds of the fight. Look how heavy they're both winging shots. With not reckless abandon, but no fear.
No, unbelievable.
Yeah, and they both got rocked a few times, but just an unbelievable fight. And it's amazing, Mike, they never actually fought a third time. I mean, we're going to talk about after this, but was there any reason why they didn't fight for a third time? Just circumstances, or?
Well, something that I was actually reading over today that I long forgotten was that Don King had signed an agreement with both fighters, right, win or lose, but forgot a certain clause in the contract, which we'll discuss later. But it's incredible because I know that they were offered substantial paydays, which would have paid greater than any other opportunity. But I don't know, just the timing never aligned. A lot of ego. I still felt coming out of this bout, there's a lot of unfinished business. But I guess they both felt their legacies were complete without the other guy. Maybe more so Eubank than Ben.
Yeah. But you can see here, I don't think either one of them. Well, I think Nigel Benn was very clear that he'd won the fight. Obviously, Chris Eubank's going to say he won the fight, but end of the day, it was a draw.
You see it in the reaction. Ben refused to attend the post-fight interview and also the post-fight press conference. So that reflects, I guess, how deeply he was cut by the decision not rolling his way, which is understandable. I thought Ben edged the fight. I know it was tight. Yeah. And I wouldn't argue a draw, but I thought 7-5, 8-4 even possibly for Ben.
Yeah, Tazzy, I thought the same. The official scores were 114, 113 for Ben, 115, 113 for Eubank, 114, 114 each. How'd you see it? I thought it could have gone either way, and I think a draw in the end was probably a fair result.
Yeah, either way, I probably steer towards Ben or a draw. But yeah, look, you wouldn't sneeze at it. I mean, it was very, very close and very competitive.
Yeah. So Mike, after this fight, Ben had 8 more fights, went 5-3. He won 5 and then obviously lost his last 3, including the losses to Collins, but also that tragic fight with McClellan in there as well.
Yeah, I think that not the irony. That's not the right word, but the incredible part about both of these guys was that they both partook in ill-fated contests in their careers, which is just, I mean, what are the odds of that happening? And then I think that probably, if anything, it assisted them in their later years when they've gone on the speaking circuits to forge a bond and grow together, because what EUBANK endured with the career ending, but the near life ending injuries to Michael Watson, and then Nigel Benn, and what transpired with Gerald McClellan, who's never the same again. Of course, blind and in a horrifically damaged state. I think that both of them kind of, I guess, formed the bond in later years to realise that they almost come out as two survivors of what can be the most brutal trade in the world. And I think also that for Ben, it probably affected his legacy a bit more, that he never was able to secure that rematch, like the third bout, to equalise and actually have a win on his record over EUBANK. But it is what it is. I think when we look back at them on time, they're both respected for very different reasons.
Yeah. No, they certainly are. And I think British boxing fans, I don't think sort of hold either one of them accountable either way. I think they see them as both legends of the sport, and they just provided so much excitement and energy and controversy and the rivalry to English boxing. I thought it was great. So Tassie, so we've just mentioned Ben. So EUBANK had 6 defences and lost his title to Steve Collins, lost the rematch to him as well. Came back for the loss to Joe Calzaghe, and then 2 losses to Carl Thompson as well. Retired with a 45-5 and 2 record, 23 KOs. And you talk about similarities, Mike, but Ben had a 42-5-1 record. So even they had those similarity in tragic circumstances, but also the records were very similar too, Tassie.
100%. Just thinking of this one day, I know we done a Australian top 10 pound for pound ever. Geez, I'd love to sit down, Mike, and one day do it like in England. Like, I don't know how you do it if you do Great Britain or you just have English fighters. Like a UK top 10. Some of the fighters, these two, Nazim Hamed, would you have Barry McGuigan, would you have Lennox Lewis, would you have
Calzaghe.
Wouldn't that be a fun?
What about Barry McGuigan, Mike?
He's Irish, technically, right?
Is he? Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah, so we can.
That's Great Britain.
But I won't mention his name again on this program, considering how much Tassie scolded me in the past for suggesting him versus Fennick in the fantasy fights.
He was a great fighter in his own right too.
I think, like, even British history, just British, say, middleweights. So if you go super middleweights, fascinating historically, going back to say Turpin, and then you go to modern day. I mean, obviously, Ben and EUBANK were the 2 flagship fighters of the 90s, really, that put the super middleweight division on the map in terms of monetizing the division.
There was a guy interesting beat for the title too,
Minter.
Mike.
Alan Minter.
Alan Minter, of course. Then to a lesser extent, you had one of the early super middleweight champions, Murray Sutherland, who's from Scotland. So there's it's a lot of really good fighters, like you said, Calzaghe before.
Ken Buchanan.
Probably not the top of the top, but I really like Robin Reed.
Yeah, great action fighter. And that's what I'm saying. Like, all of these guys kind of spawned out of that era where Ben and EUBANK created so much of an interest and thus building a market for the weight class. Like, you look at even the guys on the periphery in Britain that never got a look in. James Cook, who was maybe 22 and he was like maybe 22 and 10 as a pro, but he was like good enough that if he got the right champion, could have beat him. You got guys like Nicky Piper. There was so many good fighters in the weight class at the same time. Henry Warden, another one. But these two were the best.
Henry Warden, yeah.
Like, these two were far and away the best and really created the interest, which then...
Now, Mike, Kevin Kelly got ripped off against Chris Pyatt.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's another guy. Chris Pyatt, early WBO 154-pound champ, right?
And what about Adrian Dodson?
That's IBO. Yeah, Dodson was IBO, right? But, there's like...
as well.
But I'm saying, like, that whole era really all stems back to these two guys, stimulating the interest in the division. It was interesting, actually. So I was reading in a book by Thomas Hoffer about a year ago, and he was noting that James Toney was flown to a couple different events in the UK to try and build up fighting the winner. And James Toney found Ben endearing and had the utmost respect for Ben, but absolutely despised EUBANK as a person, and said that he wouldn't even waste his time engaging in the discussion of fighting EUBANK because he'll never get him in the ring, whereas he knew that Ben was a genuine fighter. But that would have been, I would have been fascinated mid-90s to see Toney against either guy. Imagine the talk leading up into the fight, especially him versus EUBANK.
Yeah.
Have you seen the interview between them all, the three of them?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
How good's that?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And then you throw in a Roy Jones Jr. or someone in there along there as well. This would have been unbelievable. So, so great memories. All right, well, that's Chris EUBANK, Nigel BENN 1 and 2. I think, is it back to me this week? I think.
Yeah,
I think
back to you.
Well, I've been thinking about
I
this.
don't know, mate, but I know no one does them like I do, mate. I'm the best there is.
You've been in pretty good form, mate. Look, I'm going to have a bit of a crack, and Mike, I reckon you'll like this one. This is one of my favourite fighters of all time. I've said I've met him a couple of times. He's my all-time favourite. It is the Pazman, the first fight between Vinny Pazienza and Greg Haugen. Providence, Rhode Island for the IBF lightweight title, 1985. What a classic. What do you reckon, Mike?
Love it. Love it. I actually, probably 2 days back, I reckon it was, I was just watching their third bout because the first two I recall with vivid memories, but the third I'd kind of forgotten.
Yeah, it didn't really get much notice, did
that
it?
was one of the fights that Paz was working under Kevin Rooney and made a lot of adjustments in his style. But yeah, the first one, that's the OG between those two guys. And Haugen's another one that's kind of long been forgotten. Pazienza's had now another run because of the movie Bleed for this based on his life. But Haugen's kind of long been forgotten when he was a terrific fighter and just a great showman at the height of his career. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, very
I was
spiteful.
not hoping for Julian Jackson versus Wade Ryan, but I guess we'll have to wait for that one.
Mike McCallum and Wade Ryan as well. That's super welterweight. Anyway, it's your turn the week after when so Mike. I think you might be up next week. I think, and then we're back to Peter after that. So, and hopefully we'll get another one in before. We might give you the next couple if we have to before you go, just so we get a bit to talk about. So there it is.
Peter's ass still sore after that ass kicking last week?
He's been too scared to front up this week, mate. After the hiding you gave him last week, I think he's still a bit shitty with us. I think that he lost the quiz.
I'll give him nightmares. I'm in his dreams. I'm in his head. Everywhere I go.
So shout out to Pete anyway.
I heard he can't even perform in certain avenues because I'm just in his head.
All right, boys. Well, have a good week. We'll see you in the next edition of Classic Fights. Stay tuned for the next one of Dream Fights. That's up next as well. So again, like, subscribe, share, all those things, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
See you, boys.